All right, everybody, welcome to the February edition of our DuPage ROSC Council presentation series. If you're unfamiliar with what this is, it's an opportunity to kind of take a little bit more time to dig into a topic that is relevant along the recovery continuum. So that includes substance use, mental health, all the stuff that goes along with that. And there's a lot of topics that sometimes those of us who work in that continuum maybe don't get a chance to fully dig into. I think this is definitely one of those, and it's definitely a topic that has like a pretty big intersection with a lot of the stuff that we are doing in those areas. And I thought it was really important to have a presentation on this. Family Shelter Service here in DuPage is they're the experts on this. I know we've had some partnerships with them going back a couple of years now, kind of sharing presentations, collaborating on things. They have been great partners and really, really helpful and insightful whenever we do need to find out stuff about domestic violence and things along those lines. So we're really, really happy to have Megan Benyouseff with us. She is head of the DV program over at Family Shelter Service, and she is going to talk to us today about this very topic. And we'll hopefully have some time at the end, maybe for some questions or comments. And then anything else maybe we want to kind of promote at the end, we'll hopefully have some time. So, Megan, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you again for taking the time for us, and we'll go ahead and get
Sure.
started.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'll have a lot of information for you today, but hopefully I'll talk quick and we'll leave some time at the end for you to have any questions answered and anything you'd like to share. So appreciate that, Jarrett, for the wonderful introduction. Again, my name is Megan Benyouseff. I am the DV program supervisor over our community outreach and education team here at Family Shelter Service. I have been what we've called a community advocate for about 8 years. And then recently in January became program supervisor. So very excited about that. I've done all sorts of work from direct service, work out in the community. I've done direct service groups, seeing clients, answering our hotline, and then lots of training and education. So I've had, thankfully, a wonderful variety of experience here at Family Shelter Service. And that has really helped kind of inform all of the information that I can give to you all today. So, hopping right into what we're going to be talking about, we'll be talking a little bit about prevalence of domestic violence, defining it, what those tactics of abuse look like, a little bit on the cycle of violence, why it might be difficult for people to leave, and then we'll talk a little bit more about like how we might address or look for abuse in others, and then a tiny bit on safety planning. And again, if we don't get to everything, I'm happy to always share the slides out, share any information so that you have it after the fact. And then I always like to throw out our content warning. So, of course, we know that domestic violence affects a lot of people. It's very likely that you know somebody. You might have experienced this yourself, somebody in your family, a good friend. So always just encourage people to take care of themselves. If you find the content triggering, you're always welcome to reach out to me directly. We'll share my email at the end, but please do take care of yourselves. Reach out if you need support or just want to chat through a situation. And do what you need to do during the presentation. If you like to fidget or if you need to just turn your camera off and walk away for a minute, that's a-okay with me. Like I said, do what you need to do. And then a little bit of note on language. So we always just kind of address that we may use varying terms throughout our presentation. So you might hear things like survivor, victim, person experiencing harm, person who causes harm, abuser. And there is no one specific terminology that we use. Of course, we prefer to use survivor or person experiencing harm and person causing harm because those tend to have the least negative connotation with them. But we do recognize that not everybody identifies as a survivor or survives the abuse that they endure. And language can carry different meanings based on that experience and context. So also things like we try to keep our examples pretty neutral, but you might hear things like she or he. And like I said, we recognize that there are many people who are survivors. It's not just women experiencing this. There are absolutely men, transgender folks that are experiencing this who might not identify as male or female. So always like to throw that note out there. So hopping right into what we have going on, how prevalent is domestic violence? Like I said, you probably know somebody, you yourself might have experienced this. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. And 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men have actually been injured by their partner. So these are big numbers. 25% of women are potentially experiencing some form of domestic violence from a partner. So it's very likely that you will come across somebody in your life. You probably know somebody. I myself know lots of people. So it definitely impacts, how people might be showing up in sessions or in life or coming to services at your organization. So it's always good information to keep in mind and just be knowledgeable on, because it's likely that you are going to come across somebody someday who is going to need this kind of information. And we always acknowledge too that a lot of times people don't report what is going on to either the police or a hotline or whatever, because of that fear, sometimes shame, embarrassment, humiliation. So the reality is that it is sometimes hard to get a good picture of what the statistics look like in the domestic violence world. This is really just kind of the information that we have available to us. And across Illinois, thankfully, the network in Chicago does a lot of wonderful gathering of data and reporting out to us folks. So in 2023, we noticed a 6% increase across Illinois from the year before. So that tends to be the case over the years, that it does go up a little bit. I like to put the positive spin on it of like, it's possible that people are just recognizing it more and knowing where to reach out for help. But the truth is that we do see this increase in our caseloads year after year. And most clients are people of color, so 56%, with the primary presenting type of violence being reported as equally split between physical and emotional violence. So when we screen folks for intake or registration, that is one thing that we do ask of them, is to give us a primary presenting type of violence. So they have a choice between physical, sexual, or emotional violence. And what we're finding throughout the state of Illinois is that it is pretty equally split between physical and emotional violence. And that's important to note, because we know that not all domestic violence is physical. So really what it is a pattern of behavior that's used to gain or maintain power and control over somebody. That's typically a partner or a family member. But it does not have to be physical violence in order for them to need help, for it to be considered domestic violence. Really, abuse can be anything that is physical, emotional, verbal, sexual, financial, psychological, and really kind of just includes any behavior that's meant to like scare somebody, intimidate them, make them feel afraid, humiliate them, manipulate them. So there's obviously a lot of different ways that somebody can behave or do things to somebody that accomplishes that goal. So like I said, it's more than just physical violence. And I like to address that piece of it, because even clients calling us or folks calling to our hotline don't feel that they are deserving of help because they're not experiencing that physical violence. And we want people to know that that is not the case. Everybody is deserving of help. We have people call and they're like, I know I don't have it as bad as somebody else, or I know it's not physical violence, but this is still bothering me. They still deserve that help. And things can still be scary or lethal without there having been physical violence in the relationship. So we always like to make sure that people know that it doesn't need to be happening every day or ever for it to be a problem. And it's really helpful to kind of understand domestic violence in these terms of, is their partner or family member's behavior making them feel less safe, limited in their choices, maybe not as satisfied with their life, not connected with others or isolated from others, not as joyful, and having those feelings of being fearful and traumatized. So That's always a good kind of lens to look at some of the behaviors to help determine if those are in fact potentially abusive behaviors. Same thing with that power and control piece. So it helps us kind of understand, is one partner trying to control the other? Or are they trying to have power over that person? So, speaking of power and control, this is our wonderful power and control wheel. There are definitely probably a few of you who may have seen this before, but it really is a great tool that we use with our clients and in our education to help people kind of understand the different tactics of abuse. So, you can see at the center is that power and control component. That's what it boils down to. And then the rest of the circle are all of these different types of or forms of abuse that someone can use to have that power and control. So we see things like intimidation, emotional abuse, using isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming, using children, weaponizing privilege, using economic abuse, using coercion and threats, and then physical and sexual abuse. So you'll kind of see that on the outer ring of the wheel is that physical and sexual violence, and that kind of just helps either the threat of the physical violence or sexual violence or the actual existence of it is what kind of helps maintain these different tactics to get to that power and control. So we'll kind of break down and give a couple examples of what each of these look like. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I want to make sure we have enough time to get through everything. So I'll kind of go fast here, but just covering what these different tactics might look like. So using intimidation, we see a lot of that aggressive body language, the balling of a fist, the stomping around, slamming cabinets, kind of encroaching on someone's physical space, trapping the survivor somewhere or abandoning them somewhere. So we see that sometimes like they're dropped off on the side of the road or they're left at a party or something like that, where they have no way of getting home. Reckless driving, so speeding, swerving, anything that makes, again, somebody feel intimidated or fearful for their life, giving the survivor the silent treatment until they obey, and then that slamming doors, throwing things near the person but not actually at them, punching holes in the wall, all meant to be intimidating, again, to keep that control over the partner. Using emotional abuse, so insulting the survivor's intelligence, their looks, their interests, their skills, popularity, if we're talking about sometimes teenagers or college students, drawing attention to the survivor's insecurities, embarrassing or humiliating the survivor, oftentimes in front of other people. So this sometimes shows up in forms of those like underhanded jokes, I like to call them. They're not actually funny. They're meant to make somebody feel bad. But they're oftentimes brushed off as like, oh, haha, that was just a joke. I didn't mean it. Constantly criticizing the survivor so that they don't ever feel like they're doing things good enough. They're not behaving good enough. Nothing they ever do is good enough. And then trying to control what the survivor can or cannot do. Their activities, what they wear, where they go, is another form of emotional abuse. Using isolation. So a lot of times the person causing harm will intentionally kind of drive a wedge between the survivor and their support system, either by spreading rumors, causing conflict, or just flat out saying, like, you're not allowed to talk to that person anymore. We see this oftentimes in forms of if the person experiencing harm has a friend or a family member who is kind of outspoken about the abusive partner, the abusive partner will oftentimes use that as like, you're not allowed to talk to your sister anymore. She always has a problem with me. She always has something to say. I don't want you talking to her. Same thing with friends. So that's just kind of an example where they use that sense of isolation to drive that wedge. Interfering with conversations the survivor may be trying to have with others, insisting on being the survivor's chaperone. So we see them sometimes accompany them to medical appointments, dentist visits, all sorts of places. They're not really allowed to sometimes do things on their own, especially if the abuser is fearful that they might be trying to tell somebody about what's going on, or they might be trying to leave. They might start to ramp up that kind of like chaperoning behavior. Making the survivor feel guilty for spending time with others, and then punishing the survivor, throwing a fit whenever they feel like they're not getting enough of that one-on-one time. And then the minimizing, denying, and blaming piece of it. So again, this is pretty hallmark for domestic violence. People who are causing harm in relationships don't take account, they don't take responsibility for their behavior. That's why there is this minimization, the denying and blaming, because in the eyes of the person causing the harm, they are not at fault. It is the partner's fault. They did something to upset them. So we see a lot of that, like minimizing the reality of the abusive behavior. Things like, I never said that. I didn't do that. You're misremembering it. Constantly lying about things so that the survivor starts to question their reality. So that gaslighting or kind of like crazy making behavior, um, dismissing the survivor's concerns as invalid or overblown, denying past acts of harm or the fact that harm has ever even taken place, and acting like the abuse is not their fault. So sometimes we will see people blame the survivor, blame their upbringing, their stress, their mental illness, substance use, that they have a bad boss or whatever it is. There's a lot of different excuses or maybe justifications that the person causing harm will sort of rely on to explain or justify why they're being abusive. Using children. So if there are children involved in the situation or there are children between the couple, they may be physically, emotionally, or sexually abusing the children. They may use children to intentionally inconvenience the survivor. So making them late to school, purposely missing doctor's appointments or dentist appointments. And this really kind of puts the burden then on the survivor that they might then have to go in late to work to drop the kids off at school or take a day off of work to go now take them to this doctor's appointment that the other parent didn't take them to. And really, it's intentional to punish their survivor and make it inconvenient for them, making their partner or ex-partner feel like they're a bad parent, turning the child against the parent that's being abused, so shaming them for being kind. So the abusive parent might be shaming the children for being nice to the victimized parent, or lie to them or try to pit the children against that parent. So we see a lot of like putting the kids in the middle and getting them to try to pick sides, which is not great. Convincing the children to tattle when the survivor has maybe disobeyed. And we even see this sometimes like happening in post-separation abuse. So after the couple has maybe split, the abusive partner or parent might be using the children to gain access or information to the survivor. So asking things like, who was at the house last weekend? Is your mom or dad dating anybody? Sometimes even like physically gaining access, like what's the garage code? Or I can't get a hold of your mom anymore. Did she change her phone number? So they will sometimes use children because they're innocent and they don't always know better, to kind of gain access and gain information to reach the victimized parent. And then we may see them undermining the survivor's parenting authority. So interfering with their parenting, going against rules that they've made. So if they have a certain rule, the other parent is kind of going against that or intentionally like defying that, and making the survivor out to be the villain in all conflicts. Things like weaponizing privilege. So this can include things like male privilege, class privilege, race privilege. This may look like treating the survivor as if their worth is only what they can be used for. So sometimes that's childcare, for sex, for to be arm candy. It's really like what is a benefit to them, using privilege as a justification that their choices should never be challenged. So that we see this sometimes show up in some of those like stereotypical gender roles. So like I'm the man of the house, or women don't know anything about money, so I control the finances. Your job is to stay home and take care of the kids. It's not to have your own employment, or stream of income or whatever it is. They oftentimes will claim the power they hold is inherent rather than constructed. So they feel that this is power that is just given to them, it's owed to them, rather than looking at it as a construction of society, essentially. And then using those privileged identities to kind of defend hoarding power in the relationship. So dismissing the survivor's opinions during decision making, again, controlling those finances. And that can look a lot of different ways. Using economic abuse, so making all of the decisions about money. I should also say that economic abuse, we also sometimes will call like financial abuse, can use interchangeably. But again, making all the decisions about money, placing the partner on an unrealistic budget or allowance. And this kind of sets that partner up for failure because if they cannot stay within this very unrealistic budget, then they might be utilizing a credit card or something like that behind the abusive partner's back. And then if they find out, then they're in trouble. So it kind of creates this like snowball effect, essentially. Denying them access to a paycheck, bank accounts, or credit cards, not letting them have PIN numbers, things like that. Um, Refusing to work or refusing to let the partner work or get an education. We see them sometimes open up credit cards in the partner's name without their knowledge or like with promise that, oh, I'll pay this off, and then they don't. So sometimes they'll be like running the credit card up to the limit and then won't be able to pay it off. And now it's the survivor's credit that's being damaged in the situation, which then in turn makes it difficult if they choose to leave the situation, to maybe rent an apartment or buy a new car. So again, this has effects beyond just like the immediate, oh, now I have credit card debt. It is all of the aftermath of what that means for the partner should they choose to leave or get out of the situation. Um, we also think about it in terms too of like health insurance. So a lot of times, like if they rely on their partner for health insurance, they might be fearful of trying to leave the relationship because they might lose access to some of those things, especially for folks that have a chronic illness or a cancer diagnosis or something that they really rely on going to the doctor or really need that insurance for. Again, makes it very challenging to try to leave or make moves to get out of the situation because that's part of what is keeping them stuck. And that's another form of financial abuse. We see, of course, using coercion and threats in relationships. So this might look a couple different ways. So one, we see those threats to the partner. If you tell somebody about this, see what happens. If you do this, I will have to hurt you. So we see a lot of those like direct threats. Sometimes they're threats to the relationship. So if you don't do as I'll say, I'll break up with you, I'll divorce you, no one's ever going to love you again. We hear this a lot from clients that their partner will say things like that, like nobody will ever love you the way I do. And that creates this kind of interesting dynamic in the relationship. Threats to a third party. So this might be family pets, family, like outside family members, friends, workplaces. So we see those threats like, if you don't shut up right now, I'll kill the dog. If you leave me, I will find where you're staying because I know where your grandma lives. Or you're not picking up your phone, I'm about to show up at your workplace right now. So we see some of those threats that are not always like physical violence to the person, but threats nonetheless. And then we see those threats to self. So the abuser may be threatening to harm themselves if that survivor ever tried to leave. So we hear those like, if you leave me, I'll kill myself and it'll be your fault. This can be very scary for somebody. They have to essentially then weigh their options of, do I take this seriously? If I leave, what happens if they hurt themselves, or if they harm somebody else? Is it really going to be then my fault? Do I want to take that chance? So then people feel like it might just be easier to stay or deal with this on my own because I don't want my grandma to get hurt, or I don't want that person showing up at my work and causing me to lose my job. So again, there's that control component of, you don't even have to be physically violent with somebody in order to keep that control, because those threats of harm, of threats of the possibility of harm, sometimes are enough to have that control in place. Again, sexual abuse, pretty self-explanatory, but I do like to cover a couple of things. So this is going to look like any pressure, manipulation, or forcing of the person to perform sexual acts. So sexual coercion, rape, non-consensual touching, hurting the partner during sex, and putting them at risk for unwanted disease or pregnancy. Um, the other thing that people tend to forget or not always think of is that consent is still required in relationships. So, people kind of have this myth or misconception that there cannot be sexual assault or rape happening within a marriage or a relationship. That is not true. Consent is something you should be getting every time. So we do see this come up, and people don't always realize that that's what's maybe happening in their relationship because sometimes culturally, like that is an expectation that you perform sexual acts in a relationship without question, or there's a lot of pressure to do those things. So people don't always think about it in terms of being manipulated or threatened. It's almost like it's an expectation of them. So I do like to cover that because it still can happen in relationships. And then physical abuse, digging your nails into a partner's arms, hitting, kicking, punching, all of that stuff, strangulation, suffocation, burning somebody, neglecting medical needs is one that maybe people don't always think of, but purposely not taking a partner to to the hospital or to a medical appointment, preventing them from being able to take medications or accessing their medications, tampering with medications are all forms of physical abuse, and not letting the partner eat or sleep. One that is not covered in that power control wheel, but I feel like I have to talk about because it's so common now, is tech facilitated abuse. So this really includes any use of digital tools to control, harass, monitor, or harm somebody. So tracking with the GPS, an Apple AirTag, phone apps, anything like that, where you're able to track someone's location without their consent, installing spyware on their devices, harassing via text or social media, including threats or unwanted messages. We see a lot of course, like social media harassment, the Facebook messages, the checking locations on Snapchat, whatever it is, controlling access to devices, accounts, or the internet. This includes things like you have to give me all your passwords. I'm going to go through your Instagram messages every day. I'm going to go through your text messages. That is controlling behavior. Impersonating somebody online, such as creating fake profiles or sending messages as the victim, and then sharing or threatening to share private messages, images without consent. So just a couple of ways tech abuse can look, and it's important to cover because unfortunately the law doesn't always keep up with like how fast things are evolving in the technology world. And even in my time here at Family Shelter, like I've seen more and more ways that people can use technology to be abusive towards somebody. So talking quickly about the cycle of violence and what that looks like. This is a typical pattern that we see in some of our abusive relationships. I always like to say it's not this should never be a way for the survivor to like guess or be able to tell what's going to happen next or predict what's going to happen next. It's really just kind of a tool that's meant to show that a lot of these relationships follow a pattern and why it's important to kind of get people this information. So in that pattern, there's typically three phases. Most of the relationships kind of start out or exist in this calm phase when they start out. And then some of the physical violence or other overt forms of abuse don't really show up until later on in the relationship or as the relationship progresses. So we always say that people tend to show their best self at the beginning of a relationship. If you were like screaming in someone's face on the first date, they probably would not go back out with you again, or at least hopefully they wouldn't. Um, it might take sometimes weeks, months, or even years for abusive behavior to start to show up. And survivors can be very hard on themselves because of this, because they're like, why didn't I see the red flags? How didn't I see this coming? How did I miss this? And it's, we have to help explain to them that sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes it's not like right in your face. Sometimes it takes time before those behaviors start to show up. So it's not something they're at fault for not noticing. So in the first phase, as the relationship kind of continues on and goes on, a lot of times the stress increases, the demands of the relationship increase. So we might see an increase in these aggressive behaviors. So we may see verbal abuse at the beginning. Violence is oftentimes directed at objects. The abusive behavior is reinforced because the person causing harm feels this relief of tension. So the person causing harm might be irritable, moody, demanding, nitpicking, using a lot of that controlling and gaslighting. We may see accusations of cheating or infidelity, and that use of those power and control tactics. So isolation, putting them down, intimidation, and the partner being harmed, oftentimes they can feel this sense of tension. So they are like, oh, I can tell my partner's upset about something. I maybe don't know what. So they might be trying to like calm them down or reason with them or try to avoid this like blow up that might be happening. We hear people say, like, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. They might be trying to like avoid the partner, withdraw from the partner. And then what ends up happening is there's usually an incident. Sometimes it's like a rule changed, and now they have an excuse to be abusive, or, I say excuse with a grain of salt. Um, they oftentimes then will kind of cycle into this explosion phase. So the event that kind of triggers this next phase is usually a power struggle that's set up by the person causing harm. They might issue a new rule to their partner, or a previous rule is suddenly changed, and the survivor is kind of unable to meet their abusive partner's expectations. So in an effort to kind of like punish or regain that control, the abusive partner will then choose to use abusive behavior to make a point, um, or the kind of justify like what they're feeling. So they might be insulting, threatening, humiliating, using physical or sexual violence, stalking, preventing the person from leaving or calling the police. And then the person who has been harmed might be trying to de escalate their partner, call for help. Um, we see a lot of clients come to us while they're in this kind of crisis. So they might be coming for an order of protection, they might be wanting to come into shelter, they might show up at our walk in hours. So it's important for us to kind of get them any kind of information, knowing where to go for help, how to call for help, that what's available to them is out there so that they know in case they come back to the relationship. We know that it takes folks an average of 7 times before they leave the relationship for good. So it's not uncommon for them to go back to the relationship. Um, and part of that is because we then cycle into this damage control phase. So after the incident has happened, it doesn't always have to be like a big physical thing. It could be a verbal argument. It could be a physical incident. There could be sexual violence. Um, but essentially, as I mentioned before, the person causing harm sort of feels this relief of tension. They feel like, okay, I got my feelings out. And now we can kind of cycle into this like damage control phase. So this is oftentimes characterized by like a calm, nonviolent period after the abusive incident has occurred. And the abusive partner may actually believe that they will never be abusive again. They oftentimes base this belief on the fact that they think their partner has um, learned a lesson, that they've been taught a lesson, and that they'll kind of conform to the abuser's expectations going forward. So we hear a lot of fake apologies, those false promises. I'll get help, I'll go to therapy, um, I'll do all of these things I've been promising to you. I love you. They might be buying gifts and flowers, trying to justify their behavior. Again, that minimizing, denying, and blaming. The blaming substances, stress, anger, the partner, mental illness, their upbringing. So a lot of times we hear that, like, oh, I had a bad day and my boss really made me mad and I couldn't control it. That was why I yelled at you. And really, there's no accountability. So they're not like, I did that and yes, it was wrong. And this is what I'm going to do to rectify it. It's very like, I feel justified in doing this and it's your fault. And I'm not going to apologize for that. So the person who's been harmed oftentimes feels guilty. They blame themselves for what's going on, that they couldn't help their partner or fix the partner, whatever that might look like for them, they might actually feel hopeful and happy so that they're hearing all of these really nice things, right? Like, I love you. I'm going to get help. I'm never going to do this again. So there's a lot of hope that the relationship will change. There's a lot of hope that the partner will not do this again or actually keep their promise or do the thing that they've been promising to do. So they may agree to stay in the relationship or return back to the relationship. They might try to get the abusive partner help. And we also see people drop their legal proceedings. So they may drop that order of protection. They might leave shelter to go back home. And again, that average time, being 7, it's not uncommon for them to go back. And then the cycle kind of continues on. And again, it's natural for people to want their relationships to work. So people always look at me like I have 10 sets of eyes, but it's true. You don't go into a relationship going, oh, I hope we break up 6 months from now, or I hope we get divorced in 3 years. People naturally are like putting a lot of effort into their relationship and wanting it to work. So it's not surprising that people don't initially get out, or maybe they go back to the relationship in hopes that it will improve. So that's why we always say it's like super important for people to have this information, because if it does happen again, they at least know, who do I call? Where do I go? I can go get an order of protection, all of those things. At least they have that kind of knowledge base then at that point. So we know too that it's difficult for people to leave because leaving is the most dangerous time. 75% of domestic violence related homicides are happening after the person left the relationship. We know that people continue on to experience post separation abuse. So just because someone has left doesn't mean the abuse just is over. They will oftentimes still continue to experience harassment, stalking, a lot of that tech abuse that we talked about. So it's important for people to know that so that they can kind of plan to exit the relationship safely if that is what they choose to do. So a little bit about recognizing or responding to abuse. If you are coming across somebody who you might think is going through an abusive situation, here are some things that you can look for. I always say this is in addition to all of those tactics of abuse that we talked about, that power and control wheel that we talked about, the cycle of violence. So those are kind of our first and foremost tools of like, this sounds familiar. This sounds like that cycle of violence, or some of what they're talking about their relationship seems like it might fit these power and control tactics. So those are your kind of first indicators. But these are some other things that you can potentially look out for. So are they fearful of their partner? Sometimes they're fearful of like strangers or other acquaintances, and that might be out of character for them. Symptoms of depression or sadness, that anxiety, emotional numbness. Sometimes that's low self-esteem or self-worth, feeling very helpless. Some of the behavioral indicators, they might be isolated from their friends and family. They might be feeling suicidal. They may often, or not often, but they may sometimes express homicidal feelings toward another person. So we want to be looking out for that as well. Appearing anxious about something that would maybe not normally create anxiety in that person, such as being suddenly like they're terrified of being late or getting out of an appointment on time, going somewhere alone. So kind of we're looking for those kinds of things. They may be struggling with addiction. They might be feeling hypervigilant. So what we see sometimes show up in clients is that they are always trying to stay one step ahead of their partner. So if they're like, I just get this done, if I do it perfectly, if I do it the right way, if I just stay hyper vigilant and stay ahead of this, then I can maybe mitigate the abuse. We know that that's not true, but we do see that show up in clients a lot. And then they might be missing work or appointments. For physical indicators, if there is physical violence happening, we may be seeing that bruising, lacerations, or scars, black or swollen eyes, fractured bones, split lips, broken teeth. They might be going to the ER, or if they're like, hey, I've been, this is my 5th visit to the hospital this year. You might be like, okay, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. unwanted pregnancy or a history of injuries that are not well explained. One that's not on here that I always like to add to is that they might be dressing seasonally inappropriate. So if they're wearing long sleeves in July or a turtleneck or a scarf around their neck when it's not very cold out, um, just kind of like mentally noting that there might be something that they're trying to avoid people seeing. So if you do have somebody that you maybe expecting or suspecting that there's abuse or maybe they've disclosed some abuse, um, we always like to say just remind people that you might be the first person that they have ever told. And kind of how you respond to them can be very important in their next step. So if they feel that they have been judged or dismissed, they're probably not super likely to want to keep reaching out for help. So we always say, like, be non-judgmental, be supportive, give that person your full attention. Keep their safety and confidentiality at the forefront. So we want to make sure we're not unintentionally causing harm to somebody, or putting their safety at risk. We never tell people like, hey, you have to go do this, you must go do this. It's really working in collaboration with survivors to figure out what's going to work for them, what's going to keep them safe, and also reduce harm in the relationship. We want to be offering resources to that person. So giving them a hotline number, a website to go to, whatever it is, we want to try to connect them to something. When possible, we always want to be validating the survivor's experience. So if you have them in front of you, we don't want it to unintentionally like victim blame. We want to validate what they're going through, believe their story, um, help them kind of recognize their strengths and their survivor skills. A lot of times people don't realize they've already been surviving the situation. So what have they been doing to survive? How do they cope? How do they handle situations? And help them recognize those strengths because sometimes they need it. They need somebody in their corner being like, you got this, you're doing great. You've already been doing X, Y, and Z. Let's keep building on that. Um, we don't want to be asking stuff like, why didn't you just leave? Or what did you do to make your partner mad? Or are you sure it wasn't something you said? We don't want to unintentionally victim blame. And then, of course, help them kind of understand those abusive tactics and dynamics. So, if you recognize that saying, hey, I learned about this, this sounds like, the cycle of violence, or some of what you're telling me sounds very on track with some of the tactics of abuse that somebody might use. And then you can kind of go further into the conversation. And I always say that if there's one thing that they take away from the conversation, it's that no matter what, they don't deserve to be abused and it is not their fault. Because that is what they have been told by their partner is that this is your fault. You deserve this. If you would just do all of these things or not make me mad or whatever it is, then I wouldn't have to treat you this way. And that is not the reality. Nobody deserves this. It's not their fault that their partner is choosing to use abusive behavior, and there's help out there for them. So that is really the most important takeaway, if anything. Um, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I want to leave time for questions, but just know that we do offer safety planning. I also have like a safety planning training if that's ever something people are interested in doing. We can kind of go further in depth of what that looks like and how to do that with clients. But really, it's kind of any set of actions that can help someone lower their risk of being hurt by their partner. So including things that are specific for school, work, staying at home, staying safe during an abusive incident. So we can really safety plan for any kind of situation. It doesn't just have to be the safety plan to leave. And this really includes things like knowing where to go for help, keeping a list of important phone numbers, planning with children how to stay safe, where to go, letting them know that their job is not to protect the parent, it's to keep themselves safe, arranging a signal with a friend or a neighbor, things like preparing an emergency kit or a go bag, planning when it might be safe to get away or know like the safest time to call for help or talk to somebody, go to a counseling session. And again, leaving can be the most dangerous time. So if somebody does leave the relationship, we don't typically recommend them going back home without, you know, somebody accompanying them, a police officer escorting them. So those are good things to keep in mind. There are a lot of really wonderful safety planning resources. So one, you can always call us, call our hotline. We're happy to safety plan with folks over the phone. They can come to our walk-in hours. But there are a lot of tools, and I have kind of like a resource slide so that you can look that over. But there's some great resources on how to safety plan, and you can print them up and go over them with the client or just give them over to them. So we have document the abuse, great place to store any information that they need to, copies of text messages, screenshots, photos. Essentially, they can keep a list of what's going on that website. It's secure, so it's a great resource for folks. DuPage County, we have this wonderful supportive services QR code, so that links people to the family shelter hotline, sexual assault resources, how to get in touch with the state's attorney's office, how to get an order of protection. So it's nice because it's sort of like a one-stop shop for victim resources. Womenslaw.org, fantastic website. Legal information gives you state by state legal information, but they have a great safety planning tool. Tech safety information. Love is Respect is for younger folks, teenagers. So if you work with that population, great information there. These two at the bottom are both safety planning apps that people can download on their phone. So just like to make sure that people know about these and are aware of them. And then what we offer, we have our 24-hour hotline. We do orders of protection assistance in DuPage County. So we're over at the DuPage Courthouse. We provide adult and children's counseling sessions, so individual and group counseling. We have our emergency shelter, and then our community outreach and prevention team. So we do trainings, we go out in schools, do lots of wonderful community events. Important to know is that all of our services are free and confidential. People do not have to pay for any of our services, including orders of protection. They are available to anybody that is experiencing domestic violence in all genders, all ages, doesn't matter who you are. If you are experiencing domestic violence, you can get help with us. And all of our services are available in English and Spanish. So another good thing for people to know. Walk-in hours are on here Tuesdays and Thursdays at our office in Wheaton. And then if you're ever interested in getting a much deeper dive into domestic violence, we do offer the 40-hour domestic violence training, typically 8 times a year. We'll probably start offering that more because we just included a new position, a DV trainer. So we'll probably be offering this once a month. So if you're ever interested in that kind of training, we're happy to have you. We have group rates. If you have a big team of people that want to come and get trained, we're happy to talk more about that. Diana Blackburn right now is our part-time trainer, and she'll be working with our new full-timer once they start. Bathroom posters, hotline cards, brochures, any DV materials that we can get to you, please reach out to me. I manage all of that. So happy to send you anything you might need. It's all free. Have some brochures, put up posters in your offices, your bathrooms. I will send you as many as you want. I'm happy to give them out. So I always like to throw that out there. And then our Instagram and Facebook, if you're not already following us there, please do. We keep up to date on, if walk-in hours are canceled, events that we have going on, trainings that we have going on. So great way to keep in touch with us. And that is all I have for you. My email is down here. So like I said, if you need to reach out or have questions, please absolutely do so. I'm happy to chat more with anybody.
So, just everybody give a digital round of applause for Megan. That was such a great presentation. Thank you, Megan. A lot of
Yes,
great
of
info
course.
there. And so I do want to open it up for some questions, just a couple that kind of popped up in the chat as we were going through it. Kathy asked, does the safety planning training include teen violence towards parents? So that's the first question in the chat.
It doesn't specifically, but if that is something, like you have maybe a team that you want that presented to, we're always happy to tailor our presentations or add stuff into them to kind of address specific topics. So that's definitely something that we could talk about.
Okay. And then just a couple other comments in the chat. Christine mentioned the Document the Abuse site is a really nice service. Winter mentioned that the staff that works on the third floor at the courthouse are great, been a big help to the
That's
public defender's office. Um,
awesome.
yeah, if anybody has a question, they can raise their digital hand. I'm just going to start with a quick one, and then anybody else who wants to hop in can. As an organization that like we kind of I guess our purpose in some way is just to like identify like barriers to like wellness, barriers to service, however we want to refer to it as. So as somebody working in DV, what do you feel like kind of the systemic barriers that y'all face on a daily basis in that work?
Yes. Um, well, my follow-up would be, are you asking about like us as professionals or clients' barriers? Or both?
I mean, I guess it could be both.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I would say like we know that people are experiencing a lot of different things that get in the way of either getting help, knowing that there's help available. Um, Sometimes I will say, like, from my personal standpoint, is sometimes that people are lacking that education. So sometimes people are giving incorrect information. We have a great law enforcement protocol in DuPage where they have to report domestics to us. But it's not uncommon sometimes for them to maybe give an incorrect piece of information. Um, so that can sometimes be a barrier. People don't always know what's available to them. I think from a client perspective, there's a lot of things that get in the way of like why it might be difficult for them to get out of the situation. That could be any of those types of abuse. So they might be experiencing financial abuse. They might have been isolated from their friends and family and don't have anywhere that they feel they can turn. Um, Sometimes people just don't know what's available to them. Like I've lived in DuPage County my whole life. And you know, just through doing this job, I've learned so much of like who's out there and what services are available to people and how much stuff can be of use to people. But like so many people just don't know that it exists. So a lot of times that is a barrier in and of itself is that like we have to get our names out there. We have to make sure that people know we exist and that we're here to help them. Um, Sometimes it can be the legal system is a barrier.
mm,
So we are doing a lot of work to train professionals who are working within the court system in different capacities on like what this looks like, what to look out for, because we don't want to unintentionally like re-victimize somebody. We know that
yeah.
sometimes clients report struggling going to court or having custody cases. So making sure that like all of the people who need this information are getting this information so that we can not have that be a barrier for folks.
Thank you. Great answer. Anybody else have some questions? Like I said, you can raise your hand. Ben.
Yes, hello. Let me lower my hand. Thank you, Megan, for your
Yeah.
presentation. Really informative and fascinating. It's funny because my wife and I were talking about this. She teaches at a local college, and I wonder, I don't know if there are any resources or stuff for students.
Hmm.
She has experienced students in her classroom that have, I don't know, divulged their secret to her
Yeah.
and has been, she teaches English, right? So it's sort of like outside of her wheelhouse. She wants to help, but doesn't really know where to go. And I don't know, just educational forums for students on both sides of this thing.
Yeah.
Uh, I did take down your loveisrespect.org, which I think would be helpful for college students, university students. I don't know if you
Hmm.
could speak to Title IX issues or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Yep. We have our prevention team actually does that. So they do Title IX. They will go out into the college classrooms, high school, middle school, elementary schools, and they have different curriculums that they'll talk about, kind of depending on the age group. But um, if you want, shoot me an email and I can get you some more information. But I would love to connect and see what we can potentially bring out there because we do definitely go on campuses and sometimes do like resource tables. We'll go out into classrooms. Even just sharing our materials, our brochures and hotline cards can be helpful to have in the classroom should she have someone disclose abuse to her.
Sure, that's great. And I have SOBOTKAM at metrofamily.org.
That's correct.
Okay. One last question.
Sure.
And that has to do with trauma response that you talked very early in this
Hmm.
presentation. I understand fight, flight, and freeze. Can you shed a little light on the fawn part of that? I've not heard of
Yes.
that.
Yes. So, for those who might be familiar or not familiar, that people will have sometimes a trauma response. So, they might fight. So, if their partner, they might, yell back, sometimes be physically violent back. Um, that can look a lot of different ways. It's not like actual always fight, but they might, stand up for themselves, put their foot down. We might see people freeze, so they're not sure what to do. They kind of just freeze up and they don't have a response one way or another. They're not sure how to respond. Their system might be overloaded. Um, the flight. So sometimes when people have that, like, oh, there's danger, I'm going to run away, I'm going to avoid this, I don't want to deal with it. So they might leave and not come back. They might shut down. So that again can look a lot of different ways. But the fawn um, is sort of people's response of like maybe placating or catering to their partner. So I talked a little bit about like sometimes we see people cater to their partner in hopes that they can avoid that abuse. So if they see their partner start to engage in some of those abusive tactics, they might fawn to them. So like cater to them, try to get them to calm down, placate them, try to like, improve the mood or improve the situation. So we do see that kind of stuff come up where it's almost like that. Um, if I can just do everything right, I can maybe avoid what's coming.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
of course.
Great questions, Ben. Got a couple more minutes. Any other questions for Megan, or just comments if you're somebody who's kind of worked along these lines, or if you've had experiences with it? I just want to say again from our side of things, it's important to be able to like cover topics like this. I think like across the different subsections of like the recovery continuum. So like I think this is really important for like mental health workers. I think this stuff is really important for substance use workers, and it goes to something you said, which is we can't do everything at one place, right? And so to be able to kind of have cross pollination on like at least the educational portion, I think is like really important. So
Yeah,
thank you for coming to take the time to do this
of
for
course.
us. I think I know I'll take away, having a much better insight on, some of the things that maybe I didn't even know would be considered DV, right? Or maybe I've seen other people, exhibit past behaviors and I wouldn't call it out because I didn't think it was DV. So this is
Right.
important stuff for us to learn. Any other like final things you have for us, Megan?
I
I
think
think you
that's
have
it.
your
Like I
contact
said,
info. Yeah,
yeah, please reach out if you want information, materials, further training. Like I said, we're always happy to um, customize a training, or if you're like, hey, I have this idea, is this something you can do? We're happy to chat more about that. So
perfect.
thank you so much for having me, Jared. I super appreciate it. And
Yeah.
um, hope you guys took away something from this. And again, like I said, I'm happy to share the slides if you want to send them out. If people feel like that's useful, I can do that.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we'll have the video up on YouTube hopefully later today, and we can share
Cool.
that everywhere. And
Uh,
yeah, we'll see y'all next month. I think next month we're going to do the ADHD and productivity culture presentation. So, looking forward to that one. We will see you guys next month. Thanks a lot.
thank you.
Bye, y'all.